Okay, everybody, in this video, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the interface of Avid Media Composer. So if you are a PC person or if you've never used more advanced programs, you might be a little freaked out by the multi-window interface. So these are all different windows that you can move around and resize, and I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the four main windows. So first of all, we have the project window. That's this guy. And before I even start, let me mention that if you close out of this tab, you'll close your project. Oops. Let me open it back up. Now, unfortunately, Avid autosaves whenever you close the project, but you can make yourself look like a little bit of an idiot if you think you're just getting out of one window and you actually close your entire project. You'll notice a number of different tabs on top of the project window, but for the moment, let's just stay in the Bins tab. We'll get to the other ones as we need them, particularly the Settings and the Effects tab. Now, the project window is where you store all of your media. And all media, in fact, any kind of asset, when we say asset, we mean footage, we mean still pictures, we mean music, we mean effects, we mean graphics. Any kind of asset must go in what Avid calls a bin. Now, this is the icon for a bin right here, and when you create a new project, it automatically creates one bin that is named the same thing as your project. Now, you can also create folders in the project window. So if I right-click anywhere, you'll see that I have two options: create a new bin or create a new folder. Whereas all media, as we just said, must go in bins, folders are optional and are basically only there to help you organize your bins. So I could create a new folder and call it raw footage, and I could put my bin inside that folder. You'll notice that folders, and these are all four folders here, see the folder icon, have what are called disclosure triangles, so I can click that and it'll show me the contents of the folder. On the other hand, bins do not have a disclosure triangle. You have to double click them and they will always open in their own window. So if I double click this, it brings up the bin window, which is the second of the windows that we'll discuss. Now, I will give you a workflow for how to organize your projects later in terms of creating specific bins and folders. But right now, let's just leave it where it is. We can create folders and bins in the project window. Folders are used to organize bins, whereas bins hold all of your assets, and bins also open in their own window. One final thing to mention is that you cannot, even if you wanted to, put assets directly into a folder. Everything must go into a bin. Now, don't worry about these automatically generated folders. They just contain search data. There's nothing you can do to get rid of them, and they have to do with the computers that you have used to open this particular project. Don't worry about them. Okay, so now we've talked about the project window here and the bin window. Now you can have many, many bin windows open at one time, but we don't have any bins in this project. So we'll move on to the next window that we need to talk about, which is the composer window. Now the composer window is a multi-function media viewer, and it's made up of, on the left, the source monitor, and on the right, the record monitor. Now, these two terms will become very familiar to you as you get to know Avid. For the moment, let's just think of them as source side will show you clips that are in bins, and record side will show you what's on the timeline. And it's more complicated than that, but for the time being, let's just think about it that way. And with the magic of editing, I brought up a new project to demonstrate this concept for you. Okay, so if I double click on different clips that are in my bin, you'll see that they get loaded into the source monitor, the left side. I can then use this playhead, or what we call the position indicator, to scrub through the footage. And you'll notice that each window, I should say each monitor, this is all the composer window, but the source monitor and the record monitor both have identical sets of controls: play, pause, in and out points, etc., which we'll get to later. Now, if I'm on the timeline and I scrub my position indicator or my playhead back and forth, you'll see that we're looking at the timeline footage on the record monitor. Okay, now we'll get into more specifics regarding the timeline in a later video because there's a lot to know about how this works. But just for now, see that you load clips into the source monitor, and then you can drag them onto the timeline, although that's not the preferred method for getting footage onto the timeline. You can do it, and then you can preview your sequence in the record monitor up here. One last thing about the timeline. Please note the difference between your sequence and your timeline. A sequence is something that you create in a bin, right-click, new sequence. You can see what I've done here. Whereas the timeline is a window. Okay, so if I close the bin in which my sequence is, It will auto-save the sequences bin and close the sequence, but my timeline window is still open. Conversely, if I close the timeline window, it'll be gone. And even if I try to open my sequence then, it won't come back, and you'll be confused. So, to make sure that your timeline window is there, go to Tools, and then Timeline. And there's my sequence again. Now, last thing before I give you the keyboard shortcuts for this lesson, let me just mention it's kind of counterintuitive that all the windows we've been going over, project window, bin windows, composer window, and timeline windows, are found not under the Windows menu, but under the Tools menu, okay? Under the Tools menu. Okay, now it's time for keyboard shortcuts. The keyboard shortcuts that I want to tell you about are basically for this lesson to help you navigate between the different windows of this multi-window interface program. So most of the ones I'm going to tell you, you can find right here on the Tools drop-down menu. First of all, Command 9 for the project window. Command 0 for the timeline window. Command 4 for the composer window. Those three are really good to know. Remember, the more you can do with the keyboard and the less you can do with the mouse, the faster an editor you will be. So if I'm on the timeline window and I want to go to the project window, what keys do I push? Command 9. Boom. If I want to go to the composer window, Command 4. Boom. If I want to go to the timeline, Command 0. And Command 0 might be the one that I use the most frequently. Another way that you can get back and forth between windows, and this is true of any program on a Mac, is to use Command tilde. And this will just sort of toggle between all the different windows you have open, okay? Command tilde. And then the last one, the last keyboard shortcut that is helpful to know is Command Option D, and this hides and brings back the dock. Sometimes that dock will get in your way when you're trying to scroll around at the bottom, and you can resize the windows, or you can just use Command Option D to hide and bring back the dock. All right, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for listening.